Gardening can be the loveliest kind of activity. It can be very enjoyable to have just one pot with an herb in it. It can be very enjoyable to try to grow a lot of food for yourself and your family. So some of the personal benefits are that it feeds your mind and your stomach, and you have to commit to your garden. So it's a practice, and it creates healthy living because you're actually connecting with nature. You're connecting with the soil and the insects and the sun and the rain and everything. And you're more physically connected as well as mentally and emotionally. And then it does benefit the community because even if you just have a small, tiny garden, you have local farmers who open up their farms. They sell at farmers markets, and they have, like, we have a community sourced sustainable garden co-op that we have in our community. So even though I have my own garden, I also get vegetables and things from this farmer called Fortunata, which means fortunate in Spanish. And you can be assured that what you're growing is non-toxic. You have natural growing methods, and you can share with neighbors. So I have 11 fruits, different types of fruit growing in my garden. And when apples and pears come around, it's just all hands on deck, picking them and then taking them around and sharing them with everyone else who also has a lot of apples and pears. And sharing with the neighbors, making gifts for the neighbors by making jams and applesauces and drying things. You can do that too. And it's something that you can connect with your neighbors on, regardless of whether you know them well or not. And then another big reason is we reduce our carbon footprint, and we actually help to create a more sustainable society and sustainable culture. So now, is it too early to envision your garden this year? It's only the beginning of March. No, it's the perfect time, because in gardening, timing is everything. It's everything. And to have a successful garden experience, you need to plan in 4 different areas. You need to have a plan. First of all, you need to have your garden's location should take into consideration where the sun shines, where is it the hottest or coolest in your area that you want to garden in, what kind of soil you have, your weather conditions, your last frost date. Somebody mentioned that at Memorial Day they plant things. And it's very tempting where I live, because if you live in Montana, of course, it's very cut and dry. You have a very definite winter time, and then it breaks into spring, and then it may have fits and starts, but you just kind of really know exactly when to plant your tomatoes for the summer. But here in Northern California, sometimes, like even right now, it just seems like it would be the perfect time to plant the tomatoes, because it's not too cold and everything's starting to bloom. But it's not a good time. And I have to wait until maybe the end of April. This year, maybe it'll be a little earlier, but the end of April for sure, beginning of May, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So you have to really understand that. And you can find out from your neighbors and your master gardeners in your area and looking it up online. You need to know what you want to plant. There's different times of the year that you can grow cool season vegetables such as lettuce, greens, cilantro, and that kind of thing, versus warm weather vegetables, which are more tomatoes, squashes, beans, peppers, and that kind of thing. And you need to have optimal soil enhancement to make rich garden soil. So those things are very it's good to make a plan around all those things and at least have it in your mind. If you're the kind of person that needs to write it out and map it out on a piece of paper, that's also good too. because you can do research and you can kind of put the things together. So it's good to start with a basic outline that you can build on year after year. Like, for instance, it's the second year of the raised bed garden, and the first year didn't go so well, which is okay. That's fine, because that's how you learn. That's how I learned. That's how every gardener learns what to do in that particular spot, right? So you need at least 6 hours of sun and warmth for a garden. And usually the south side of the house or the western side is where you get the most sun and heat. The eastern side is you can grow cooler, loving things. And the north is not such a good place to plant things, although I have a row of fruit trees. I have apple, plum, pear, cherry, fig. They're all lined up on the driveway. That's the north side of my house. So they get cool, they have cool, cold roots because the north is cold. But they reach up above the house and they get the warm sun. So it's very good for them. And fruit trees do need some coldness. They need some freezing coldness hours in order to really produce good fruit. So it's a good place to put them, even though it's the north side. And then make sure that you have access to water. You don't want to make your garden and then realize that that you have to stretch 200 feet of leaking garden hoses to get to your garden. You just don't want to do that. And of course, we'll talk about soil, raised beds, or whatever it is. Excuse me, I just have to. I have the heat on and it's really making me hot. So particularly when you first start out, you can draw out your design on a piece of paper with measurements. Or you can do what my lazy friend Dan did and just throw out his vegetable scraps and seeds and all, cover it with manure in the winter. And then when they come up, the seeds come up, they have the nutrition from the composting manure, and he just let it grow. Sometimes he'd thin it, but that was it. It was just this mishmash. He had a great garden. So it can be very careful and, measure it out or not. You can also, so to assess your soil, you can take a shovel and dig down in the areas that you want to plant in. Is it easy or hard to dig? If it's hard to dig, is it compacted? Is it sticky? Is it have a lot of rocks in it or a little bit of rocks? But is it kind of like a hard pan, almost like you could take it and make a cup or something? That's clay. And most plants don't like clay. There's some plants that can grow in clay, but not very much because they can't get their roots down into the hard pan clay. But clay is a wonderful thing to have if you add compost to it, because clay has a lot of minerals in it. And as the compost mixes with the hard pan clay, the particles in the clay are electrically charged and that they stick together. But when you add the compost, it breaks it up with the humic acid, and it releases the minerals. And so your plants can uptake the minerals, and then you eat the minerals, and it's great. But you have to add a lot, and you have to continually add it year after year. And you have to take out any big rocks that are in there. You have to take those big, huge rocks out because they get in the way of being able to dig. The rocky soil, you have to take the rocks out. Then you add the compost, and that's fine. Or if it's very easy to dig and it's sort of sandy, there are some plants that like sandy soil, like carrots. But for the most part, it doesn't have a lot of nutrition in it, and it doesn't have a lot of holding power for the water. So the plants don't like that either. So if you put the compost in, we're going to talk about compost, then that is that makes that soil very friable and easy for the plants to get down into, but you have to add a lot of compost to it. Now, if you are lucky and you have the dark, rich soil that you see on the right, and that's the dark, rich, loamy soil, and you're just lucky you have that. It's maybe you had a tree or it was in the floodplain of a river or something, then you're lucky. And you just add some nutrients and you're good to go. So assessing your soil is very good because you're going to have to work on it before you plant any of your plants. And some of you who live in, like in Montana and that kind of thing, you're not going to be able to work on that until, it gets warmer. But I can work on it because I live in a different climate. And then you can build soil, and you add nutrition to the soil. You can add worm castings. That's dope for plants, literally dope for plants. If you have worm castings, which are really basically worm poop, then the plants just go crazy. You can add kelp, which adds micronutrients, which you can get at garden stores. You can get them in boxes and things like that. And you can add chicken manure, as long as it's, or different types of manures to add nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to the soil. So when you add these different things to the soil, you want to dig it in. Oops, sorry. Okay. Then, of course, different plants have different water needs, and you need to know that. If you overwater, if you underwater lettuce, it will become bitter. If you overwater lettuce, it will become wilty. Sometimes what people do is they'll plant tomatoes, and tomatoes like a lot of water, like regular water, but you can get them growing, and then you can gradually cut back until they don't get as much water in the end of the summer, and the fruit becomes more fruitful, more flavorful. So knowing what your water needs are for your different plants is a very important thing, and it will just be a matter of experience. You'll look at a plant and you'll say, well, that plant's a little gray, it needs some more water, or it's wilting, it could either be getting too much or too little water. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay. All right. Then you want to know your last frost date. So a light frost can be anywhere from 29 to 32 degrees. Moderate is 25 to 28, and severe is, below that. So you may be able to plant cool weather veggies in April in the northern parts, and warm weather veggies, around Memorial Day, right? Southern gardeners, cool weather veggies might actually be in February or March or April. And then it just depends on what your frost date is. It keeps doing that. All right. Cool weather vegetables include lettuce, bok choy, radishes, kale, broccoli, peas, and celery. You can plant it in the early mid-spring. You can grow under 75 degrees. They tolerate cool soils and survive light frosts. You can grow lettuce under tomatoes in the summer, so you can create microclimates even in the summer. So that's an interesting, by companion planting, you can actually combine these different plants that like the companionship of other plants. Warm season vegetables are tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, squash, melons, and peppers. And those grow up to, 60 to 85 degrees with, regular water. They need warmer soil to be planted in. So it's a big mistake to plant, especially tomatoes, in a cool soil. They're not very forgiving of that. So you can grow things inside. You can grow microgreens, and you can grow lettuce in containers and bring it in and out. And if you're a Southern gardener, you can grow them, anyway, that's sort of redundant, but, and I'm not going to go through this. All right, now I want to talk about seeds. Oops. I want to talk about seeds because this is the time of year to plant seeds. And there's some advantages to growing your own, having seed starts and growing your own plants and starting your seeds now. The advantages are that you can grow different kinds of heirloom varieties of vegetables, and you can kind of see them on the left. There's like the black carrot. There's this one carrot that's purple and orange and delicious. You can grow different kinds of tomatoes and that you can't get the starts of them. And it can be kind of a wonderful way to really enjoy the bounties of everything. So what you want to do is you want to order your seeds now, or you can buy them. Like where I am, there's a garden store that has different organic seeds. You want organic seeds, and if you want heirloom seeds, you can order them from Baker's Creek Heirloom Seeds. And if you know of other ones that you order from, you could put it in the chat, because there's a whole network of people who grow these heirloom varieties that are disappearing, really, and are not grown by the normal horticultural practices of the industrial offerings. And you can have them in your you can have them, and you can trade with people. You can trade seeds. You can partner with people. Sometimes getting seeds, you have so many of them that you can't use them, so you can actually share them with your neighbors and other people that you know. So you want to order your seeds now, and you want to start your seeds in sterile soil. And so you can go to a nursery store, and they will have potting soil for seeds. You don't want to just dig, in other words, you don't want to dig it out of your garden outside and then bring it in. You want to actually have it in soil that doesn't have some things in it, like some pathogens that might kill the seedling roots and that kind of thing. So before you start, so on the right, you can see there's these little cubicles that you put the soil in, and then you can pre-moisten it before you plant the seeds. And the seeds are going to vary in size. Some are going to be really big, like, squash seeds. When you're cleaning your squash, you notice that there's big seeds. You want to plant it twice as deep, and then push it down twice as deep, and then cover it. But other seeds, like the carrot seeds, are very small, and so you want to take and have strips of not toilet paper, of paper towels that you put the seeds on, the carrot seeds, because they're very small and they need to be on top of the soil, and they get dried out really easily, or they get lost, or when you water it, it scatters them. So, and then you have to understand what the environment is that the seed needs. You're going to pick an area in your house that has windows and where you can cover the floor so that it doesn't ruin the floor if water gets on the floor, and where they can get some sunlight. And then also yes, and then you want to label your seeds and put the date on it, because it can be really a weird experience to plant things in your garden and then you realize that it wasn't that it was a completely different seed than you thought. And then you can use peat pellets also to plant spring peas and greens in it to plant out. And you can plant your tomatoes in large peat pots. So I'm going to stop now. I've covered a lot, but I did that because I wanted to have some discussion, and then we'll come back to some other topics if we have time. So I'm going to stop now, and then we can open up the discussion. Hi, Vidu. We can open up the discussion to and Michelle. So let's so I've covered a lot of ground. Why don't you ask questions and share your experiences of what you have found?
I have a question with starting seeds indoors. What's the propagation time length before they're ready to get outside?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say 6 weeks is,
Yeah.
I mean, some come up, lettuce seeds will come up very, very quickly.
Mhm.
And peas will come up very quickly. Tomatoes are less, are more time. So I think you have to sort of find out, you have to factor that into when you plant them. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you go back from the date that you want to plant them, you come back. The tomatoes now for sure, but lettuce seeds and that kind of thing, you could probably wait.
So friends, ask the gardener, now's the time. And you can unmute yourself and just speak up.
And you can also put it in the chat if you want
Yeah,
to.
either way.
Is there anything?
Michael's talking about the seeds he orders from Rare Seeds.
Okay, so you have unusual peppers, tomatoes, and beans. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And carrots and corn. Where do you order from? Oh, Rare Seeds.
Yeah.
Yes. So Rare Seeds is a wonderful one. Johnny's Seeds is also good too. So what are the unusual peppers, tomatoes, and beans that you order? Have you had any favorites? You're probably on mute. I
Yeah,
get.
everybody's muted just about.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
Mini corn was
Oh,
sure.
you can grow popcorn.
That's fun.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
Because you just take the popcorn and you just they're stalks, and you
A
just
little cob.
cob stalks, and you can just take them off.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any varieties that you just love? Like my favorite tomato is Cherokee Purple. And there's one called Berkeley Tie-Dye that I discovered a couple years ago.
Sounds fun.
So what are some of your favorites? So Michael, what were some of the things that you found was not too successful? Because you were saying that your raised beds you had the raised beds, and I'm assuming you made them out of wood? What was it that wasn't too successful?
I'm able to come off of mute.
There you go. Right.
Mhm.
So the beans were very good for us. The beans worked well. Some of I had problems with the squashes.
Uh-huh.
What were the problems?
They just didn't develop, so I don't know if I was underwatering them or I wasn't sure.
Hmm. What kind of squashes? Were they the hard squashes?
No, it's more like a zucchini squashes type. Yeah. Um, and then my raised bed I made out of just one by ones with some untreated siding wood that I had,
Mhm.
house siding.
Good. Um, my daughter made hers out of, what was it? Oh, she made it, yeah, so she made it out of treated wood, which worried me, right?
Yeah.
Treated wood can have toxic, like lead, not lead, it can have toxic zinc and stuff in it. But then she lined it with plastic, so then I worried that the plastic was getting into her garden. So that was pretty funny. She lives in Alaska, so
Yeah.
she has actually really developed a really wonderful indoor-outdoor garden scenario. So what about some other people? What are your aspirations for this year? What would you like to see for your garden? Ivy, do.
Hi, Chris. So I'll jump in. It's very aspirational here. So I have to leave.
She lives in San Francisco.
I do. I do.
That's a whole garden place, unique gardening there.
Yeah, and I think I'm only aspirational, Chris, because I love the idea of the garden so much, and also the metaphor of us tending to our inner garden really speaks to me. And so there's something much deeper here about why I cannot garden, right? So I'll have to have you come over and help me and bribe you with food.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
not any other way.
How about some saag paneer?
That
Yes.
works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any dirt in your backyard?
Yeah, we're all set up. I mean, I
Okay.
did have greens growing and they were eaten by the squirrel, and then we tried various things. So now I'll just start from scratch again because to me, there's a disconnect when I think of land and garden and also being an immigrant and how disconnected I feel as an immigrant,
Sure.
like a more spiritual connection to place and land through garden, I think is what I'm interested in, is just as sort of a more metaphorical, physical earth connection, and so, and I think what you're offering is physical tips about gardening, but I also see you as as a very mystical gardener. So whatever you say, I feel like there's the physical garden, but there's the other meanings that I'm gathering that I'm open to.
Yeah, there is a mystical side to it, which is, and you shouldn't get discouraged if things don't work right. Like Michael was saying, the beans were great, but the squash just didn't take off, Why didn't it take off? Was it because it was too wet, too dry? Maybe the seedlings didn't work out. I mean, it's a whole accompaniment of the plant to get it into finally get into its mature form for it to yield yield its bounties. Some things I find I grow really well, and I don't even have to think about it, like the lemon tree and all that. Other things like carrots, I'm so carrot challenged. I don't even try anymore, right? So, and then some, like one year I had a garden and it was doing really well, and then the fires came. And the smoke from the fires just completely destroyed. I couldn't it made everything toxic, so I couldn't even use it. So there's a lot of things, but the one thing that you have to remember is not to get discouraged, to find that way to actually connect. Because you actually have a challenging area to work in. San Francisco is a challenging place to garden. Sonoma County, not so much. So I will come and visit you. Anybody else? Sorry. Got something stuck in my throat. Yeah, getting discouraged can be a hard thing, because then you begin to think, oh, I'm not a good gardener, right? So oh yeah, I'm not a good gardener and I don't, but when you start to, I had this one student, I was teaching medicinal gardening, or I was teaching culinary gardening with medicinal herbs as well as culinary herbs, because it's, surprise, surprise, culinary herbs are actually medicinal. So I was teaching this class at Bauman College, and I had this one student, part of what we were doing is going out into the garden and actually planting things and being in the garden. And this one student was from New York City, and she'd never even put her hands in the dirt ever. And the idea of it was absolutely appalling to her. So she did not want to get her hands dirty. She didn't want to get her nails dirty. She didn't see the reason why. So I said to her, I brought her a plant, a basil plant, and I said, just put it in your window and just water it and notice it. And after a while, she came in and she said, oh my God, it's so wonderful. And so for her, it was an absolutely wonderful experience. She connected with the plant. So that's the thing, you can take one plant and you can connect with it. and then it becomes, you have a relationship, and then it becomes something that you can enjoy. So is there any other, oh, hi, Em. Is there anything else that people would like to talk about, or should I go on?
I have a comment.
Uh-huh.
You know, I think growing herbs is a good way to start.
Mhm.
And there's perennials and there's annuals. So if you comment on that a little bit, what are some herbs that you can put in the ground that will go through a life cycle and come back the next year? And then you go, hey, look, it's still here. And it's giving us, you know, nourishment, and also flowers, you know, the value of planting perennial flowers and getting this relationship to the earth cycle.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really wonderful to have a kitchen garden
Yeah.
and to have your herbs right next to your kitchen,
Mhm.
if you can. Now, you may live in an apartment or something, you know, or you may have limitations, but it's great just to run out and grab the thyme, cut a little bit of thyme off, or some rosemary and that kind of thing. Some herbs, so setting aside herb garden, herbs grow really well in containers. So even if you are renting and you have to move, you can put them in containers. So there are annual and perennial plants. Most of the herbs are annual, but some of them, like there's thyme, sage, rosemary, mint.
Mhm.
Careful planting mint. I planted mint and it went everywhere.
Too much.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful herb. There's lemon verbena. There's those are all perennials.
Chamomile.
Chamomile can be either
Okay.
annual or perennial. So With those, they're pretty forgiving. They don't require a lot of water. They don't require, the soil that you plant it in should be well draining soil, but you don't have to baby them a lot. Rosemary,
Yeah.
gosh, all I do is water it once a week. I hardly ever pay any attention to it. Sage is the same way, and thyme. If you water them too much, they'll die. So that's pretty cool. Then there's other herbs, which are annuals, like basil, cilantro,
Parsley,
what?
parsley.
Parsley,
Tulsi is a really nice one. Now that
which
it's
one?
Tulsi
Oh, yes, Tulsi.
for tea,
That's the
either
best.
straight up, because I'm thinking of herbs for teas
Yeah, sure.
and like really micro, like, going along with the way Ed speaks of
Yeah.
teas.
Yeah.
Tulsi in a tea, straight up, or in a black tea is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
You know what? The Tulsi is supposed to be really incredible for your brain and for circulation, and it's an amazing plant. And the best way is to actually have it fresh from the garden.
Oh, yeah.
You get it dried, it's like half
Yeah, it's not the same.
the potency. So that's another thing. And
So,
you
Chris, in India, we put Tulsi in our tea every day.
Sure.
So like in
do?
my family, my mother we have the Tulsi plants growing, and then we take leaves and we put the Tulsi and crushed ginger in our black tea.
Yeah.
And it is the most delicious tea ever, so, and also the curry leaf, which is less available, just to season, those are plants. So yeah, I think going micro and going towards the teas or seasoning sounds like doable.
Yes, it is doable and it's very satisfying. So that's what you want. You want to have success, because if you try to do too much, then you shoot yourself in the foot sometimes. Sometimes not, though. But yeah, that's a really, really good point. And Tulsi doesn't grow in all climates. So sometimes Tulsi is really a perennial. So like in India and that kind of thing, I noticed that it was a perennial, and I noticed that people grew them in containers,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool. Here, even in Northern California, it's not a perennial, it's an annual. But we have basil that we buy at the store and make pesto, and that's an annual as well. So, and even tomatoes are annuals. Most vegetables are annuals, although I did know somebody that had a 5-year-old, three-year-old tomato plant. So anyway, all right, so I'm going to go back. And so does anybody else have any comments or questions? Yes. I think you're on mute. Are you on mute?
I'm not hearing you. Doesn't show you as muted, but
Yeah, it doesn't show you as muted.
Can
try
you
again.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so nice. Sorry, it's my headset. I loved everything that Vidhu said about I was preparing foods. I couldn't get on camera, but I was like nodding my head because I love I'm the same way. I just can't seem to do the gardening part very well, and it has nothing to do with the weather. I think it's just it's more me, but
There's a support group there,
yeah, and I love how you so naturally blend everything, and it has that mystical component, and I very much identify with the connecting with the land and all that, and so it's so important to me. And but I can't. Maybe because I'm always in the kitchen, like I just don't get out to the garden. So my husband is the one actually that I plant it and he nurtures it. So yeah, but I love hearing this the way you talk about gardening and like herb gardening, and it's just so magical to me. It's just that it has that. So anyway, I just wanted to express my appreciation because and likewise, like what we do is saying, I was just nodding my heart was nodding. So, but yes, I would be very curious about how I can maintain my garden better. We're just on a fringe of San Francisco, so we have a little bit of microclimate, but maybe more sun. But I just can't. And the Tulsi grows actually it came back. But I would love to. Yeah, I just don't know how to get that rhythm going. And
Yeah,
daily rhythm part. Yeah.
yeah, and you do have to accept the reality of your situation, which is, that you do live near San Francisco, which is not that easy. It's got lots of microclimates. So what you want to do is you want to take advantage of the microclimates. And so part of the mystical part of it is also just really connecting with, sometimes you can just go out and sit and just know that it's there, you can just sit there, and then you kind of know if something is right or wrong, like you can just notice that, but you don't have control over all of it. So that's the thing. I've killed as many plants as I have grown plants, even more. So maybe it's a matter of volume, I don't know. And then sometimes I'll grow, like one year I grew this beautiful flower
Yeah.
called Myconopsis. And it was this beautiful blue poppy that grows in the Himalayas. And it grows everywhere in Alaska. But here it was like such a rare thing. And I grew it and I was so excited. It's a perennial. So it should come back year after year, but it didn't. But you know something? I just like, thank you, I just thought it was a gift. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't have those same struggles where I'm like, I don't know how to grow carrots or whatever, or that I get distracted and I forget, or that like 2 years ago, I started all my tomato plants inside. And then I had a bunch of them and I gave them to different neighbors. The different neighbors had did their plant that I gave them, the tomato plant, did really well. In my garden, they just sat there and I had to go out and buy some plants at the nursery because they just were not happy. And I don't know why, I don't know why. It was just something about maybe they got too cold or maybe the soil wasn't right, and I mean, that is the reality of it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this, sharing this. So if you have any more questions, let me know. So let's see. You can, let's see. So we've already gone over this. Okay, so you can design for fun. Okay. So on the left is my lemon tree, and I never have to feed. I do feed it. I actually do feed it because you can see it's got kind of yellowy leaves on it. It will get a deficiency, so I do have to feed it. But I used it as a as a landscaping point, where instead of just planting any kind of tree, I planted a lemon tree. So you can actually do edible landscaping, which is really fun. On the right, and I don't know if you can see it with this strip, but see on the right is vertical gardening. So this person built this up against their fence, and it has actually strawberries, and underneath it has different kinds of flowering plants. But the strawberries, one of the problems with the strawberry is when it lays on the ground, the plant lays on the ground, the strawberries grow on the ground. Well, there's little pill bugs that want to eat it. There's all kinds of things. Any animal coming by will eat a strawberry. Everybody loves strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
So by planting them like this, it's a feature. It's a very fun feature, and for the landscaping for the eye, but also you can pick the berries, they hang down and they don't get eaten by things except for you. And so it's very utilitarian as well. So you can use the different spaces that you have to create a really nice design. Having an herb garden we talked about outside your kitchen door. You can plant a circular meditation garden, which is really fun. I did that for a friend of mine who was in a wheelchair. and she would come to the edge. I planted thyme, like there's this really flat thyme that you can do, and I planted thyme, and she'd get out of her chair and she'd lay in the thyme, and she just loved it. You can do a pizza garden where you actually grow everything that you want for the pizza, and then you have a party with your kids or whatever. It's really fun to think about those things. You can have hedges. I have a whole hedge of this fruit that is called a Chilean guava fruit. It's actually a landscaping plant, but it has this fruit. So you can do double duty. You can do container gardening. Look at on the right here. They have this whole park. This whole park with trees and all kinds of things that will actually make it more, you can bring your garden into your space, even if you live in an apartment. So there's certain things about container and balcony gardening. You have to make sure you can water without damaging the underlying wood or balcony. So you have to really, really be careful with that, because I have ruined floors and all kinds of things with the water overflowing after I do it. You have to make sure that you do protect it against the frost and the cold. So sometimes you have to put it on rollers and bring it in. Like if you have if you have a lemon tree, you can grow it even in Montana, but you have to bring it in during the winter. And then you have to watch the movement of the sun and position them correctly. Otherwise, the plants won't do well. And then, of course, when you have plants in a container, they tend to need to be fertilized more, and occasionally you have to flush them with water because they get salt in their soil. So if you see that it's getting burnt edges and that kind of thing, take it to your outdoors or to the bathtub or wherever, the shower, and flush it. And sometimes you have to put it in a bigger container. So you have to learn and listen and learn to what your plant needs. And then here's some valuable gardening resources. Your knowledgeable neighbors, the ones that the older people, when I moved in here, there were 2 sets of older neighbors who had gardened here a lot before, and I learned a lot from them. And then there's the Master Gardener program. You can really pick their brains. You can call anytime, and they are usually at farmers markets and that kind of thing. There's a YouTube called Garden Callie Kim 29, and I love her tutorials. She has lots of tutorials about different aspects of gardening that will help with all kinds of things like that we've talked about. And then Rare Seeds is one. Whoops, sorry, it's not going down. And Baker's Creek Heirlooms are both, they're both seed companies that you can do. And so you can have a lot of fun with the design and everything. In terms of starting out, I think that what you should really do is just start out very simply. Just be simple, like pick a few things. Unless you really want to go for it. Like I tend to want to go for stuff. So you can go for it and then see what works and what doesn't work. But if it intimidates you and you feel discouraged, you're not enjoying it. And you're not getting the food value out of it that you want. I also want to say one other thing. There are different ways of gardening. So like I've used my yard and I've landscaped my yard so that it has a lot of edible things in it, as well as the flowers that I love. And Michael built his raised beds, and he did that probably for a variety of different reasons. You can do other things. You can get bales of hay And there's a whole gardening technique where you just use bales of hay. And the hay breaks down as you grow your things in the bale of hay. Or you can use the bale of hay as your garden bed, as your garden wall. You can just make a bed that you fill with dirt with the hay. If you use alfalfa, that's even better because it has more nutrition in it. And you can, there's some people, and then you just garden within that, and the hay breaks down and it becomes garden soil. Then there's another technique where you go to where the spot where you want your garden. You throw down a bunch of leaves and other organic material. You put some fresh manure on it, maybe your food scraps, and you just let it sit there over winter. And sometimes people, if they let it sit all year, and then they just plant down through it, and it makes good soil. So there's a lot of different techniques. So I've introduced a lot of things, maybe too much, but let's see. Vidu says, wage peace with your listening. Hearing sirens, pray loud. Remember your tools, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers, make soup. That's beautiful. I love that. So,
Chris, sorry, it's a poem by a poet called Judith Hill, and her whole poem is like we're breathing in confusion, and then we're breathing out like actually an image, which usually is like, she says, breathe in chaos, breathe out dancing raspberries, right? So then it changes the way that you think of chaos, because we're living with so much chaos. And I find all the great mystics, including you, such as you, Chris, and the poets, why do they turn to nature for this very reason? Because we're so far from that,
and you're really actually connecting with life when you do it. And that's why, even if you don't have your own garden, you can go to a garden and feel connected. You can go to the park and feel connected. You can go to, the lake and be connected, because we are connected. So when you're gardening, you're creating this atmosphere around you that brings nature into your life and your heart, and gives you relationship. It feels right. It has to feel good. It has to feel right. So if it's too mechanical, but it is gardening is work, and it's timing, all those things. So are there any other more comments? Yeah, I am.
I appreciate you mentioning mistakes. I think that's the part I struggle with, is when a plant dies and I feel like I've wasted, because my mother's from, like, she's a World War II child. Post World War II child. So I grew up with, like, you try not to waste, but she's a fabulous gardener herself. But I think I struggle with that, like making the mistake or the wasting of it. Like I feel, but I love your story about the tomatoes, because that just, it's just nice to hear, like, that, an experienced gardener like yourself, and you're saying it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay if the plant dies. And I've heard that from other gardeners as well, and I find that it's very encouraging. I have to remind myself that it's okay, that if the plant dies, it's not the end of the world. And I think that's what I struggle with, is like that part of it.
Or if it doesn't produce,
Yes.
I've had tomatoes plants that only produce 2 tomatoes, and I'm like, oh, these are my $8 tomatoes. I don't know. But then the next year I just go, okay, I planted it too late, or I didn't feed it enough. I should feed it more, or give it more space. You just learn each time.
Well, the other thing that I struggle with is gophers. The gophers,
Yes.
like I have received plants from, like, my herb teachers. I have had several, and each time it's like a gift, and I plant it and I look at it when I come in the house. And then I noticed one just like the
Yeah.
roots completely eaten. And then the other day I was sitting out when it was sunny outside, I was sitting out and I saw the plant moving. And what? And then I would look over, and it's almost like the gopher had underground eyes, because it would stop. And then, and then I would look away, and I was like, is it my imagination? And I would look away, and I look, and the plant would start moving again. And I'm like, what the heck is, and I realized it was the gopher eating my,
It's
it's
funny. I mean, it's not funny, it's kind of pathetic, but
well, I was
when you
laughing.
do, it's like,
The gopher was like, kind of pausing for, what do you do about gophers?
oh yeah, so that's a really good question. Some people plant each plant, they have a cage, and they will plant the plant in the cage. That's why a lot of people have, like Michael, have raised beds. They put wire underneath it, and it keeps the gophers from getting in. Although sometimes the gophers have figured out that they can climb up and over and down into it. So it has to be tall enough. And sometimes people poison them or trap them. And sometimes people just plant a lot of things around the edges of their gardens. They know that the gopher will eat, so there isn't as much damage. And then there's also something called gopher spurge. And you plant gopher spurge around your plants, and they don't like it. It's distasteful to them. So you kind of, but it's also poisonous for us. So you can't get, or you can't get the oil on your hands and stuff like that. It's very caustic. And so, there's, gophers are a really big problem. This year I have, my tree is loaded with lemons, Meyer lemons. And I've never had to worry about this before, but the rats are eating just the peel and leaving the lemon part. And so I go to my tree, and it's like, oh my God, they're doing, and they must be very hungry, right? They've never done that before. So it's another thing I have to kind of struggle with. Okay, how am I going to solve this problem? Because they're going to eat all my lemons, So it is, that's part of gardening too, is that everything loves the garden, so. But then that's part of it. You're protecting your plants from being accosted. So yeah, Eddie.
I have a comment in that. For me, it seems like it's a collective process. That I think it's a lot for an individual, and particularly if you're not already warmed up and know what you're doing. But by working with friends and colleagues and people who know what they're doing a little bit, it makes it more interesting and less overwhelming. And then we're now building a community garden. And now we're building a community practice. And now we're watching things grow and things get eaten and things grow and together, because it's a lot. And then again, if we don't do it, we're just buying packaged food, or we're complaining about the cost of food, which will continue to go up and up and up. And the one thing I've noticed, thanks to Chris, is that we have a lot of fruit trees and bushes and berry things. And so we can, we have lots of fruit, and we have some veg, but some years we don't have much veg because we're traveling or we're sick or we're, took a year off. There's all these things that do go on in life.
Or the
But I do
fires.
think collectivizing, not necessarily on a commercial level, but just on a social level and spiritual level, would bring us together, and also get the kids going, because kids have to get some familiarity with where things come from other than the grocery store.
Mhm.
But it's a labor of love. And the other thing I've really admired is just Chris's ability to see what's going on with the plants. Because I don't read them. I look at them and I go, I can't really see if they're happy or sad or hungry or thirsty, or but because she is tuned into this from years of experience,
Yeah, my dad
Um,
had
yeah,
gardens, so I grew up
yeah,
helping him grow tomatoes and stuff, right?
yeah.
So,
So we can read books, but even Luther Burbank, who's one of my heroes, he learned from growing and watching and observing and combining and changing, and his notebooks are observational. And when they studied him from Stanford University, they go, "What's your technique?" He goes, "My technique is I communicate with the plants. I combine hardy plants to make hardier plants. I look at things that don't work." And again, if you look at life, most things don't work.
mhm,
I think that's a big life lesson as we get older, is a lot of things don't work.
mhm,
But when we turn it into a lesson and a learning opportunity, well, if that didn't work, maybe it would work this way, or maybe we get serendipitous. And then a lot of learning is totally serendipitous, just because we notice something along the way. And then that's very, joyful. But composting is okay because the plants go back to the earth and the earth likes composting. And we can all be, instead of just putting your trash out, on the curb, you can put some of it into something in the backyard. And that again creates a different kind of rhythm.
mhm. Yeah, so start off simple,
Yeah.
then build. And that's really the best way to do it, I think.
Yeah.
Is there any more questions or anything, or any comments?
Any glimmers? I mean, any little rays of light that might have come forward from our conversations?
Well, I feel like it was a spiritual lesson. So
Yeah.
thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
There's a really neat, do you know Plants of the Southwest? Yeah, they have a lot of, I worked there for a while. They have a
Yeah.
lot of heirloom plant, vegetables from the Rio Grande Valley,
Local.
So that's a good place. People used to bring their salsas into us. Like they buy all these pepper plants and then different kinds, and then they'd bring their own recipe. They'd have their own recipes and they'd bring in these different salsas. We could try them,
Nice.
benefit from the peppers, how they make them. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
everybody.
all. And it's good to see old friends, new friends.
Okay. There's a couple of things in the chat. I'm just briefly.
Go ahead,
I
Michael.
heard
Michael's coming through.
urine can deter gophers, and that's true. That's
Okay.
true. They can
I got
deter,
lots of urine.
and also like your hair.
Oh,
Like if you have hair, or like go to a hair cutter and get a bunch of hair and put it in the gopher holes, they hate that.
Huh.
And they have lion's pee, mountain lion pee or lion pee or something like that you can put in the holes too to deter them as well. There's lots of
there's
these.
tips.
Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
It's true.
And then Michael says, I read that $64 tomato.
Yeah, that's classic. I've noticed that, but I try not to wait a minute.
Wow, this is really, my daughter lives in Alaska, and so she, tomatoes are like really coveted up there. She has an indoor room that is completely dedicated to, she has grow lights and everything.
Yeah.
Completely dedicated to growing herbs and different things. And so I took a couple of tomatoes up there and we had a party, and you should have seen the look on people's faces of the homegrown
Homegrown
tomato.
local.
It's a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
It was like they went into ecstasy because they don't get that up there, so it's pretty funny. But yeah, the $64 tomato is really a true. And at the same time, when you get it down, you can be making sauces and you can be doing all kinds of things.